Hey, my name's Alex. I'm 27. I live in Maryland, and I identify as genderqueer. Brief introduction. Today's topic is about when you realize that you were queer, whether that be you being gay or trans or genderqueer or whatever. The moment where you kind of thought to yourself, "Oh, that might be true for me." Not necessarily coming out to other people. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Basically, what happened with me was that I, I've, as far back as I can remember, I've always had, crushes on girls, and even with regards to my gender, I always kind of felt like I didn't fit, like very, very early on. I think when I want to say 4, I made my mom cut my hair so I could look like my brother. I always wore his clothes. I would demand that my parents call me by boys' names because I thought Alex was a girl's name for some reason. I didn't really comprehend that it was very androgynous, and but yeah, it's always kind of been there, and so realizing it for myself was harder because when I was in school, um, a lot of the people, they would kind of tell me my identity right off the bat, but not in a positive way. I got called dyke and fag and he, she, and it, and all this stuff for a very long time, and that made me quite afraid to confirm their suspicions. And so I just basically didn't tell them. I didn't actually come out until I was about 21. And with regards to kind of exploring my gender, aside from some stuff that I did when I was a kid, um, it was mostly my girlfriend at the time. Just basically asked me one day, "Have you ever thought that you wanted to be born a boy?" And I was like, "Whoa, no one's ever asked me that before. Like, I actually get to talk about it now. That's weird." And so we had lots of conversations about that, and just having the opportunity to be honest and open about it was huge. Um, so when I realized and thought, oh, I might be gay, that was fine. I never really had an issue with that. I didn't really have examples of queer people in my life to be like, oh, this is perfectly acceptable and cool, other than in the media and stuff. But when I could put it into words, I was probably about 14. But before that, like I said, I mean, I always had crushes on girls, babysitters, friends of the family, stuff like that. I mean, all the time. So it really was not shocking to me that I was like, oh, why am I not interested in boys? I was like, no, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. The gender thing was definitely a different situation. I didn't really, because what ended up happening, when I was younger, I thought about it all the time. And when puberty hit, I was like, this is not okay. Like, I really freaked out about that, and I got really depressed. Um, but then I kind of knew that, I mean, I didn't know any words for who I was or how I identified, but I just kind of thought, this is, whatever this is way too intense for me to be dealing with right now. So I kind of suppressed that a lot and did not even acknowledge it or mention it or talk about it to anybody, even myself. And when the thought would pop into my head, I would just do something else to kind of get it out of my head. Um, so that kind of sucked. I probably should have spent more time exploring that earlier, but I do think things happen when they're supposed to. And for me, a big part of that was meeting the girl who had my first relationship with, and she was incredibly supportive and cool, and just kind of gave me the support and space and comfort to be able to acknowledge it and talk about it and explore that in different ways. And um, whatever I wanted to do, she was totally on board with. And when I was confused about it, she would let me talk to her. So I didn't really own that identity until about 23, like I said. But what I would say, if you are in a place where even just to yourself you're thinking about, oh, this might be how I identify, do what every queer person does, which is what I did. Go online, watch videos, watch interviews, watch, whatever you can get your hands on, basically, um, that have people talking about their identities because they might be similar to yours, and it might give you a lot of relief from what you're feeling, or at least something to say like, oh, that might be how I identify. When I first heard the word genderqueer, I think I was 20, and I read it real quick on Tumblr or something, and I was like, oh shit, like that's yeah. And then I freaked out because I didn't want to deal with it yet, and I was like, just put that away for a while. And so it's a long process coming out to yourself. Even now, I mean, I'm very comfortable with my identity. being genderqueer and also being gay, but I mean, there's still a million questions I have. There's still a million things that I may or may not do depending on how the rest of this process goes. I think initially what made it really hard was that I was, if you're not, I knew I wasn't cisgendered. Once I learned the term cisgender, I was like, well, that's definitely not me. But then the other term that you would hear is trans. So I was like, oh, well, I must be trans. I think that because I only had the word like cisgender or trans, like the binary of like how you can identify, and I didn't know about genderqueer and kind of the fluidity of gender and things like that, I was kind of disappointed because I was like, well, that's not how I identify either, but I do have body dysphoria, and it was just this whole crazy, stressful, anxiety provoking, weird thing that I had to then figure out. Like Adam said, I think if you are in a place where you are thinking about these things and trying to come out to yourself as whatever identity, the biggest thing is to just kind of lean into it and start to explore it in your mind. And, if you're drawn to something that has to do with being trans or anything like that, it's not, oh, I think I might be trans. Oh, cool, let me go get a doctor's appointment and start hormones and do all this stuff. There's a million things in between, so I would just take your time in exploring that. The other thing that made me very stressed out with my coming out process to myself was that I had, in my own brain, I had this like time limit where I was like, well, I came out way later than I should have because I had known about this since I was a kid. So like I'm already 23. I need to like figure my stuff out and like figure out, what do I want to do? And I'm still not doing anything. I mean, I haven't made a decision about hormones. I haven't, I bought a binder and I bind sometimes, but that's, you know, there's a million steps in between is basically all I'm trying to say. And you get to take your time with it. That's the best part about it, is that it's stressful and it's, you know, can be horrible in a lot of ways, but at the same time, there is no limit to when you have to start questioning this stuff, when you have to come up with an answer to all the questions that you have. You just kind of have to, like Adam said, kind of be willing to lean in a little bit and start to explore it and figure out how you feel most comfortable and how you identify and stuff like that. And even if you decide that you are trans, there's still a million, like the journey doesn't stop there, obviously. For a lot of people is where it just starts. So you really have your whole life to kind of figure this stuff out. So I would take your time. I would get to know yourself. If you have questions, answer them. The biggest thing that made it hard for me was that I did not answer the questions I had when I was younger. I kind of just put it away and didn't deal with it. If you're in a position where you can start to, explore that and figure it out, I would say the sooner the better, but at the same time, there is no timeline. I would just, because of my own experience, I know that the more you kind of put it on the back burner, the harder it's going to be because you're going to just get more depressed and you're going to get more confused. And it's just not a good process whenever you ignore things that are happening, emotions that you have. So try on an identity, see how it works out. If you feel like you might want to change your pronouns, get someone that you can really trust to call you by those pronouns and see how that feels. Call yourself by those pronouns, see how that feels. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a million steps in between figuring it out and then making a decision to transition. So take your time with it. Take small steps to being more the way you see yourself, I feel like is the best advice I can give you, because that's not what I did. And it's slightly different when you don't have someone that you can talk to about it. If you don't have that, the internet is available. It's you're on it right now. It's really great, and there's a lot of collab channels like this one. There's a lot of other resources, medical resources, just people you can talk to. You can get into therapy if you feel you need to. That's super helpful just in general. Yeah, so that's basically what I would say. It was kind of a long video that didn't make a lot of sense, but that's my video for this week. Thanks, guys.